Hello, America. Welcome to this LinkedIn Live release of the March results of the Freedom Economy Index poll. This is a very important survey. 80,000 Americans, small business owners, get surveyed. It's got a margin of error of just 3%, very scientific. We get a real sense of what the pulse of Main Street is from this incredible event every month. I'm looking forward to today's conversation. Of course, this is a joint project of RedBalloon and PublicSquare. And so we're joined by both companies' extraordinary CEOs, the two guys on the front end of the freedom economy. Joining us from RedBalloon, Andrew Kaprashetz, and from PublicSquare, Michael Seifert. Gentlemen, welcome. Good to have you back.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be here.
It is good to be here, yes. And I think we got some interesting biorhythms from America's business community in this results. Let's start with one of the top lines that caught my attention. And I think you have to look at in the context of some other data, but the number of small business owners who think that we're headed towards a big recession went down quite a bit, but the business owners in general aren't very confident in this economy. Seem like they're in a posture of wait and see. Michael, what do you see from that top line result?
Well, it's interesting. The amount of folks in our business community, 80,000 surveyed, said that their optimism is at record lows, even while they believe that the likelihood of a recession is at record lows as well. So you would think that the drop in expectation that we are going to actually come into a major recession on the near term, you would think that would correlate to a higher level of optimism on their general outlook for the economy or for their business specifically, but that's not the case. One thing I did find interesting though, John, to piggyback off your point, is that optimism levels were actually regional. So if you were a business owner in a red state, you actually pulled above 35% in terms of optimistic for the future of your business. But if you're in a blue state, it's half of that. And the vice versa is true. The pessimism levels are actually regional. Blue states are higher in their pessimism about the future of the economy and their business versus red states that actually still have a little bit of hope there. So it's fascinating how sometimes what we hear reported at the top line on the macro level from the mainstream media that, oh, the economy's booming, look at the stock market. In reality, even though our business community says, yeah, we might not experience a recession in the short term, their concerns about the fundamentals of our economic environment have not shifted. And if anything, in many cases, they've gotten worse.
Yeah, and those sentiments are matched also by migration patterns. You see consumers and residents leaving the blue states for red states. So it's an interesting dynamic of watching the customers walk away and then the confidence levels between businesses being affected by that dynamic. Andrew, there are a lot of warning signs still here. You see small business owners very concerned about the tight labor market, very concerned about spending any money right now. They're kind of hunkered down, hoping to just survive the next few months and hope for something better. Is that what the outlook is right now?
Yeah, we're seeing these businesses that have weathered a lot of storms, right? They've gone through the COVID or the government response to COVID. They've gone through the Biden economic disaster that has been in this country. They've seen inflation, they've seen high interest rates, and a lot of them, the fatigue level of a lot of these businesses is very high. So while they're seeing that maybe the economy is not going to go into a deep recession or even a minor recession, they're simply exhausted. They're mentally exhausted. They're overwhelmed by all of the things that they've been fighting. And you feel this pessimism. And I think, to Michael's point, we do have the tale of two economies here. We have economies where freedom is reigning, where there's less regulation, there's less taxes. Those businesses feel like they can win. They have an opportunity to win. Whereas the businesses that are in the blue states, they're fighting so much headwind. It's just exhausting. And I think the fatigue is wearing on these businesses. In fact, 30% of our businesses said they think that not only are interest rates maybe going to stay and not go down, but they might even go up. So 30% of the small businesses are concerned that interest rates are going to go up. And the last thing I'm going to point out here is Michael pointed out the red state, blue state dichotomy, but also the purple state, kind of the tweener states that haven't really decided which way they're going to go. There's actually more pessimism in those states. And I think what that is people don't want what's happening in California. They don't want what's happening in New York or Illinois. They want the freedom that they're seeing in California and Texas and in Idaho. And when they start to see the liberals coming in and trying to take over their state or push an ideology on their business, they know it's going to be bad for them. And so that drives way more pessimism. And when small businesses are saying, look, I'm not going to make major investments, I'm not hiring a lot, I'm just kind of in a hunker down mode, I'm exhausted. And a lot of them are just saying, fine, I'm going to go to a red state where I can be free because that's the only way I can win in this economy anymore. And unfortunately, that's a sad commentary on a lot of the businesses that are stuck in these blue states. But that's what we're seeing right now with these businesses in this economy.
Yeah, and it seems like when you look into the data, the wait and see approach seems to be timed to one of either two things. Either what does the Fed do with interest rates, which could free up some money or not, or perhaps maybe they're just waiting to see what happens in this election. I'm going to ask both of you that question. Are business owners holding out for the election, Michael?
I think they are. I think the hold and wait mentality is largely dependent upon the election. We're seeing this in the investment community as well. So not only is this the case on the ground with small businesses, we're hearing from many fund managers that are sitting on dry powder saying, we're going to actually wait to see the results of November before we deploy capital. But here's where that becomes a big problem. If the business community is stalled and they're stagnant, they're not hiring nor firing, their business is struggling to find growth, because you'll find in this survey, actually, 3/4 of our business community, 75%, said that their supplier costs continue to go up on their goods. But 2/3 of that cohort has said that their prices on consumers have not changed. So you have this little bit of a ticking time bomb, and this hold and wait pattern has an expiration date. You compound that with the fact that these businesses are having a hard time sourcing capital because all the capital's in a wait and see perspective as well. It makes it tough to get loans, paired with high interest rates that we don't think are coming down anytime soon. Certainly our business community doesn't. You have this very interesting economic environment here, where everyone's kind of looking around and waited with a bated breath of what the heck is going to happen come November. My prediction is that, obviously, if the election goes the way that conservatives like me hope it does, you will see an economic release that will be incredibly powerful, and Main Street will be a major recipient of that. I think our business community, a lot of their optimism that they still hold to is based upon that. So they're actually thinking, I really see a light at the end of the tunnel. All does not feel lost, but this year's really got to go our way.
Yeah. Andrew, is it a cathartic moment, the election? Is that what people are waiting for? That is all this pent up? We want to get back and roaring, but not until we see what Washington does?
Absolutely. But unfortunately, in business terms, November is a lifetime away. I mean, we think
It's a
about
long time.
that is a long time, especially for a small business that's struggling to make payroll or is still dealing with these supplier prices. And a lot of our businesses, we're also hearing, even though they're not aggressively hiring or aggressively making investments, they're still struggling to find good talent because, and we'll talk about this a little bit with the Gen Zs, but they're struggling to find people who want to show up and work, that they don't have to micromanage and take care of all the time. And so, and when you're running a marathon, you think very differently than when you're running a sprint. And between here and November, that's a marathon for a lot of these businesses. And I think that's some of the exhaustion we're feeling. They are absolutely watching the election. They're absolutely watching the interest rates coming out of the Fed. But man, November is a long way away. And I hope a lot of businesses are going to have to, they're going to have to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and start to make some decisions before November, because that's too long to wait for a lot of these small businesses that simply don't have the margin to wait that long.
Yeah, and you see that exhaustion reflected in the number. That was one of those shocking parts of the data. All right, let's talk about the tight labor pool, because in a tight labor pool, there's a brand new generation of workers coming in called Gen Z. Wow, there is a pretty strong indictment of business owners and what they think of Gen Z workers. Andrew, let me start with you, since you run a job site. Is this a phenomenon that we're going to be dealing with for a long time? A workforce that did not come into the workforce prepared to do the hard work or have the skills for it?
Absolutely. So we asked our employers, what do they think is the most reliable category of people, age group of people, and the Gen Zs really took a beat down in this report. They did not think they were reliable. They were not the type of people that would show up and get their job done. And we saw this over and over again. And this is not surprising. There's a couple different factors that are going into this. The labor force participation rate for the 16 to 19-year-olds, kind of early Gen Zs, those have gone down from 50% down to 30% over the last 20 years. So we have basically a whole group of people that never had that first first job at McDonald's, where they learn to look people in the eyes, where they learn to shake a hand, where they learn to actually do work and get something done. That's the first factor. The second factor is our universities and our higher education system is producing people that have no connection with what reality is in the labor market. And so they come in expecting to be paid a lot, not having to work very much, and really just being whiners. And so a lot of our employers, they're struggling with these type of people. And in fact, a lot of our employers said, look, we would rather be understaffed than poorly staffed. We'd rather work extra hours ourselves. We'd rather have fewer people and just figure out a way to do it without enough employees, because bad employees are going to cost us way more than it would cost to not have enough employees.
Boy, that is a dynamic that can be really destructive. And I think it really depends on the culture of your workplace, the strength of your workplace. Michael, if you bring in a Gen Zer who doesn't have that skill set, has that bad karma, and you've got a weak workplace, you've probably created a new problem. If you got a strong one, you're probably going to be creating an internship program, right? A mentorship program.
Well, that's exactly right. You know, we have enough challenges to fight externally. We have enough mountains to conquer and battles to win. The last thing we need to be doing is also putting out fires internally. And unfortunately for Gen Z, which by the way is near and dear to my heart, I am the youngest generation of millennial. So I am one year
right on the
older.
edge.
Yeah, just
right on the edge.
Huh?
I am 1 year older than the Gen Zs. So these are my friends. They're in my community. My heart goes out to them because in many ways they were growing up in a very different environment that has a lot of crutches that have been, or I guess I should say roadblocks that have been put in their way to success. It's a very interesting last 4 years with COVID and many of them having their education restricted and the ability to actually achieve normalcy. Feels like a far-fetched pipe dream at this point. And so, you know, certainly they've had their challenges. Obviously, none of that is an excuse for some of the things we see out of the broader Gen Z, which is workplace toxicity, a strong leaning toward enveloping their workplace with their own personal issues. They have a hard time detaching their stability in the workplace from instability outside of the workplace. Whereas many generations before, Gen X, boomers, kind of had a mentality that when I get to work, I'm there to work and I'll handle my personal problems after work. That line gets blurred with Gen Z. Here's what I find with Gen Z that's interesting. Well, obviously in the survey, they polled the highest for most workplace toxicity issues, highest mental health issues, and least reliable. What I've also found about Gen Z is that seems to be the norm. But the winners in Gen Z, the real rock stars, if you can find them, are the best employees I've ever encountered. And they are so far and above their peers. And a lot of it comes down to how they were raised. As Andrew mentioned, can you look me in the eye? Can you shake me in the hand? Can you engage in fruitful conversation that's productive? Show up and be ready to work. If you can find those gems, they're really the best workers on the planet because they have a high level of energy. They are able to adapt to the new technological advancements that have taken place over the past few years. They're able to use tools that actually enhance their productivity and efficiency, but you got to find the right ones. And it's why tools like RedBalloon are so incredibly important, because if you do not find the right Gen Z folks, you're going to end up in a position, as Andrew mentioned, where you'd rather have no employees at all than have the wrong ones.
Yeah, finding that jewel in the rough is going to be the great challenge for the labor market and for all of us who are executives of companies. Andrew, reliability showed up as the number one concern of the workforce right now. They can't find workers willing to be reliable enough to fulfill the job. You run a job agency. You're trying to help people make the right matches. What advice do you have to a CEO or a small business owner saying, I'm trying to find that? I know there's a lot of rough patches in this generation. How do you find those jewels that Michael was just talking about?
Yeah, my advice is don't skimp on the hiring process. A lot of business owners, they're so exhausted by the work that needs to be done that you get this desperation moment. Oh my word, I just need to hire someone to do this, and almost have this cathartic moment of like, there, I've made a hire. It's all going to get better. But in fact, it's going to get worse. We did a study showing the cost of a bad hire is well over, it's in the tens of thousands of dollars. So if you get the wrong person within your four walls, it's going to cost you a significant amount of money. And so what we've been telling employers is you need to put the time and energy in to make sure that you're doing the hiring process well, where you're asking the right questions. Obviously, if you need help with any of that process, that's where RedBalloon can come in and actually run the hiring process for you, because you need to not skimp on that hiring process. That's the biggest thing that we tell people. You need to make sure that you have devoted, call it 20 hours to the hiring process, because you're about to pay this person 40, 50, $100,000, and they're going to be responsible for interactions with your customers, with your other employees. It's really a big deal to hire. Don't just make it a throwaway process. Make sure you put in the time and energy. And if you do, as Michael said, you can find people that will revolutionize your business, that will make you a ton of money, and will just bring joy to the workplace. And I have awesome people here at RedBalloon. I know Michael has awesome people. John, I know you have
Sure
awesome
do.
people. When
Yeah.
you find them, it is incredible, but don't skimp on that hiring process.
Yeah. You might get a few hours saved in the early hiring process if you skimp, but then you have weeks and months of aggravation if you fail at it. And that's why it's so important. We're making the most important investment we make when we hire someone. That's our human capital. I want to turn to the Gen Z, stay on Gen Z for a second. Their favorite social media platform, or certainly one of their favorites, TikTok. It's obviously a big issue here in Washington. Legislation in Congress to potentially force TikTok to divest of its Chinese owners or close up in America. I was shocked. This may be the most shocking of all the results, and there's some big numbers in this survey. Almost every business owner knows something about TikTok, and they have a variety of opinions. Michael, were you surprised by that?
I was incredibly surprised by that. The fact that only
Yeah.
2.2% of our respondents said that they were unaware of this issue. We were talking before we actually jumped on here together about how there are very few issues you could ever pull anyone on of this size where there would only be 2.2% of the respondents say they're unaware of it. So I think that shows obviously the true breadth and depth of TikTok's influence in the United States, especially with the next generation. The responses specifically were fascinating, given that the majority of our respondents actually said that they had heard of this issue and they were not supportive of the ban. So this is the freedom economy. These are American small businesses. So you got to ask yourself, obviously, we don't want the Chinese Communist Party to win. And we know that the Chinese Communist Party has their tentacles in TikTok. So you got to ask, well, why would they be not supportive of that ban? The reasons are actually pretty clear, because many believe this bill to ban TikTok actually legislates far beyond those bounds. And I think that's a concern to people. You know, more than anything, these business owners want to make sure that their privacy is protected, that their ability to operate their business without fear of overthrowing their enterprise from the government's perspective. You know, these things are incredibly important to them. I love that we have an American population that is starting to do their own research, dive into the actual text of this legislation, because just a few years ago, a ban on TikTok would have come around. People would have only read the headlines and say, well, I am either for or against
China,
that thing.
right?
Now people are diving in, and I love it.
Yeah. They're learning their government's a little more complicated than the top line, and being able to delve down and get the unintended consequences is part of our good our roles as citizens. Andrew, this is an interesting moment in the freedom economy. Obviously, there is big free speech cases pending before the Supreme Court about the future of how government's going to work with big tech and social media. There is this big question about whether TikTok is a one-off, or is this the door opening to an era of government picking winners and losers? This is going to be an issue that not only is on the minds of small business owners, probably one of the issues that people are thinking about when they pull the lever in November, right?
Absolutely. And I think the TikTok is, again, I think to Michael's point, the reason that these business owners are very nervous about this, it's not because they're big supporters of the CCP.
Right.
And in fact, I mean, this happens all the time. People are like, oh, you don't want to go to war in Ukraine. You must be a big Putin supporter. It's like, no, things are a little bit more complicated. And I'm thinking clearly.
Exactly.
And what I'm not a supporter of is the federal government yet again taking on more power, deciding that they can control our lives, that they can bridge the knowledge problem, and they know what's right for all of us more than we do. And I think that's what business owners are feeling more and more. And I really am proud of the small businesses in America that are thinking more clearly. I do think that something like this would have just happened. I think COVID was such a wake-up call to so many people of the government does not have your best interest in mind. They have their best interest in mind. Milton Friedman talks about this all the time. Many of them are acting as rational actors. They are trying to do what's best for their self-interest, not for our self-interest. And once we understand that, then we, the people who are down on Main Street, just trying to make a living, to support our families, to support our communities, we're going to be the people who are going to change this country. And if people realize that, it's going to be really exciting to see how that transforms not just in November, but the entire economy. So I'm excited that our businesses are thinking about issues. No matter where they land, they're thinking about these issues. And that is the beginning of change and positive change in this country.
Yeah, no doubt about it. The alphabet soup in Washington has more impact at the cash register, the point of sale for these businesses at any time in American history. And it's good that they're digging in. All right, we're going to wrap up with one last question because people want to know, when do we get this economy into a better posture? When is it going, engine going to roar and have a little more confidence to it? And I think there's one of the statistics that jumped out in this survey to me is the number of business owners who literally say they are stressed out, that they are literally burnt out from their job. 60% of, I think, the small business owners who surveyed either said they were that their exhaustion level was 8 or above. So 8 to 10. 60% of Americans, they're that exhausted. It's hard to run a business when you're hunkered down and completely exhausted. How do we get out of that cycle? I'll start with you first, Michael.
Well, one more data point I'll add to that mix is that 49.5% of our business community respondents here with the Freedom Economy Index have been in business for over 10 years. So these are not new business owners.
Yeah.
These are not early stage companies.
They're
These are
veterans.
veterans. These are folks that have been at the fight for a long time, serving their communities, trying to better their communities with good quality products and services, and make money while they do it. And ultimately, when you pair that reality of half of these businesses being in business for longer than 10 years with what you just mentioned, which is the exhaustion level, it eventually hits a breaking point. So the thing I'm really curious about is who's the next generation that's going to take these businesses on? Obviously, the baby boomers are starting to actually pass their businesses on, whether they're selling to private equity or passing it on to a child or selling it to a private investor. It's going to be very fascinating to watch the wealth transfer that happens over the course of the coming years as business owners who have been at it for a long time that are starting to age out into retirement say, we are going to pass on our business to the next generation. I am fascinated to witness how that goes. And I think it's really important more than ever that we are empowering a next generation of business owners and entrepreneurs that can take on the mantle, that can run with the torch for the next generation, because I get concerned if Blackstone comes in and buys up all of these small businesses that make our community special. That's not the future we want. And so the last thing I'll mention, John, here is that ultimately at the end of the day, I do think, as we mentioned, many folks are just waiting for November until they can feel a level of hope and confidence and optimism again. But optimistic Michael says that maybe as this summer moves forward and as the polls start coming out in a real surge showing that conservatives are actually experiencing traction. Just 2 days ago in Florida, city of Delray Beach, a very blue town, flipped to a Republican mayor. And now you got businesses moving to Delray, excited about it. I live right up at the road. As we see more and more of these little wins, put some W's on the board. My hope is that that sentiment begins to change for the better and these veteran business owners feel revived for a new spirit yet again.
Yeah, there's a mindset in the American electorate now that I haven't seen maybe in 30 or 40 years. It really is determined. We're going to shift gears in November. Andrew, we're going to give you the last word. Exhausted business owners, crunched by every possible force, workforce problems, hiring problems, lending problems. Is there a light at the end of this tunnel?
There is. And the good news is all of you who are listening, you're the light at the end of the tunnel for these small businesses, right? A lot of people, all of us experience this when you have, the context of, man, this is happening in DC. This is happening in Ukraine. This is happening in China. You just feel like, man, I'm not getting a win anywhere. I'm only taking hits, whether it's inflation, whether it's cost of goods, whether it's interest rates, right? You just feel like, man, this overwhelming weight, and you just need some wins. And the good news is you as consumers can be the win for these small businesses. When you change your buying habits, when you spend your money with people who do not hate you, then you are the win for those small businesses. And once they start to, and we see this in sports, optimism produces momentum. And so that would be my encouragement is go and tell someone about PublicSquare and about RedBalloon, about Just the News, and start spending your money only on PublicSquare. Like make that change and you will actually be the win that these small businesses need. And then they're going to turn that into optimism that they're going to be able to build on. They're going to be able to encourage their suppliers. They're going to be able to encourage their community. And then when people start to feel like, no, we've got this thing, we can win. That's when the economy turns around. And hopefully people continue to vote the way that they are experiencing, right? If you experience all these losses from what's happening with the administration, with blue states, with what's happening in DC, will vote differently, but be the win for a small business, because you can make a huge difference even with a small change in your spending habits. Obviously, support RedBalloon, support PublicSquare. When you do that, you are the thing that is going to change this country and make it a better place. Don't feel overwhelmed. Go do something.
We may cast our ballots in November, but we can vote every day with our wallet. And I think the investments people are beginning to make in the freedom economy and the extraordinary products and services and communities that you two gentlemen have made, it is exciting to see. I think Americans have woken up and they're already voting with their wallet, which is a great early sign. Michael, Andrew, always an honor. I've been a journalist 40 years. I've been hit with plenty of surveys and data. This is one of my favorite because it measures things that all of the old tired surveys are ignoring. You're getting to the true pulse of America. It's a great honor to have spent some time with you guys. And thank you for building this incredible product called Freedom Economy Index. With that, folks, we're going to sign off for today. Hope to be with you again next month. Thank you.